We're in week 12. Moving on to PowerShell. I'm going to cover the PowerShell stuff. And then at the end, I'll see if, anyone that wants, has some questions about last week's assignments or anything else Python, then you can ask at that time. So hopefully everyone's able to both go along with what I'm going to have up on the shared screen, and also have enough screen real estate to have a PowerShell window open. If you've already done this and gone through the PowerPoint and the PDF and done the exercises, then it's not, then maybe you'll just want to listen to see if you catch anything new. But if you haven't, then this is a good opportunity to, follow along and practice commands that we're going to go through. And whenever I can, I'll elucidate on the commands if there's anything more to add than what either the PDF or my PowerPoint has to say. And obviously, as always, if there's any questions that occur to you, just chime in. There's few enough of you that you can chime in and ask a question whenever there's, whenever I pause, which I do frequently. So, all right. Before I get started, are there any general questions about this week's assignments or anything going forward? Okay. Well, if anything occurs to you, just chime in. All right. Can everyone read what's on the upper half and the lower half of the screen well enough?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me just organize the windows here. Okay. So PowerShell, probably most of you have at least come across it. Depends on where you are in the taking the CNT classes, but it's introduced. You'll use it quite a bit in the Windows Server classes, but if you haven't taken those, then you may have just heard of it or just done a few things in some of the other classes. So basically there's likely to be a range of experiences with the class. So I'm going to assume pretty much that nobody knows anything. And so if I bore you, oh well. So PowerShell is obviously, you see it down here, the PowerShell window, and it looks like a command prompt, a Windows command prompt. And all of you should be at least somewhat familiar with command prompt because we do that in CNT 101 and some of the other intro classes, CNT110. So obviously the difference here, besides the color, which you can actually change the color, by going into the properties here of the window, just like you can change the color on your command prompt window too. But there's a PS in front of the prompt. That's how you know you're in PowerShell and not just a command prompt. If just to demonstrate, so if I can actually run a command processor by typing CMD, and now I'm in the command processor. I'm no longer, even though the window didn't change except for the prompt, I can no longer run PowerShell commands. Yeah, normally I could type that and press tab and it would finish my command, but I'm in command prompt now. And command prompt doesn't know about PowerShell commands. And now I can just exit command prompt and I'm back, as you can see, in PowerShell. PowerShell, on the other hand, does understand a good number of, most of the command prompt commands. There's a few things that don't work because PowerShell parses the command line somewhat differently than CMD does. So, well, like I said, you can run most command prompt stuff in PowerShell. Some things don't work. And so if you're trying to run a command prompt command in a PowerShell window and you're getting an error, you know, go out and try an actual command prompt to see if that fixes it. Okay. There is a open source version of PowerShell. We're going to be using the built-in PowerShell that's built into Windows. But the open source version is called PowerShell Core. When you start PowerShell, you'll see, you know, it'll even say, try new PowerShell Core, whatever. You don't need that for what we're going to do in this class. So just the built-in PowerShell will be sufficient. All right, every PowerShell command is a commandlet. So get processes, set net IP address. That's referred to as a PowerShell commandlet. And they all use a verb noun format. Every PowerShell command has a verb noun format. So you'll always see verb hyphen noun. Now, the exception is when an alias is created. But an alias is really not a PowerShell command. It's just a shortcut to an existing command. And we'll see an example of that on the next screen, I think. So even though when you see a PowerShell command, and you see what I did there, I start off just typing it all lowercase. And then magically, did a different command this time, magically it finished the command and capitalized the first letter of the verb and the first letter of the noun. That's because I used command completion by using the tab character. And you know, we talk more about that coming up, but just to let you know that it's not case sensitive. I can use all lowercase and it works just fine. And so what that's going to do is it's going to list me all the commands that look like set-net and then could have any ending at all. That's what the asterisk is a wildcard, say set-net and then any other characters that are part of the command I'm going to display. So you see it shows a whole bunch of output. All right. So it's case insensitive, but by convention, you'll see PowerShell commands with the uppercase of the first of the verb and uppercase of the noun. So when you do command completion by typing in the beginning of the command and then hitting tab, then it will automatically do the case assignment.
I have a question about the command completion though. Like in Cisco iOS, like if I, like for example here, I put get -c. If I hit tab, it would only complete it if there was only one thing left for that command. But over here, I hit tab and C and I get certificate, but I hit CO and I get
it gives you the next one in alphabetical order.
Oh.
So the very first get-c command that exists will show up. So,
okay, cool.
And I don't think, yeah, there's no way to like cycle through them and get the next one until you find the one you're looking for. You basically have to type in enough unique characters of the command that you actually want for it to complete that actual command. If I say, just like get, for example, apparently get-acl is the very first get command in PowerShell, alphabetically. So, okay.
If you keep hitting tab, it cycles through it.
Oh, it does. Tab. I didn't try. I was using the arrow keys, but yeah, I thought that it did, and I was thinking, am I thinking of a different iOS or a different operating system? But yeah, okay, good. Thanks for mentioning that. So yeah, if you keep hitting tab, it'll cycle through alphabetically all the commands that start with whatever you typed in. So yeah, good tip. Okay. All right, so to start PowerShell, hopefully everyone is able to do that. If you don't have it on your taskbar, I would put it on the taskbar at least for the duration of the class so that you don't have to, keep getting it from the start screen or the help screen. But once it's on the taskbar, or once you've got it running, and if you don't have it on the taskbar, you can just right-click on the item in the taskbar and say, if mine's already pinned, but if I didn't have PowerShell on the taskbar, you'd have an option to pin to taskbar, and then PowerShell will be right there. You don't have to go searching for it. And you can do that same thing with any program, with the IDE, PowerShell ISE, and so forth. Okay, let's look at exercise 2.1 in the PDF file. In the PDF file, they want you to type exit, and I will, but with a different window, so I don't close my other window. And of course, it just closes PowerShell as you would expect. I'll open a new window. And then they want you to run the PowerShell ISE. You can do this or not do. You could also do the exact same thing in just the regular PowerShell window. The point of this exercise is to show you that certain things require elevation. So the update help command updates all of the help text that's available within PowerShell. And if you don't have, if you've run PowerShell as a regular user and didn't open the Windows Administrator or the PowerShell ISE, then you'll get some stuff will happen, but you'll eventually get some errors, and that's because you need to open it as an administrator. So,
if you use CD to go back, is it the same as using the administrator PowerShell?
if you use CD,
Yeah, I did CD with the .. because mine was in the users and it went back.
no, just because you do it from the root doesn't make you be running it as an administrator. Basically, here it says access is denied, command could not update, blah, blah, blah. So most of the commands that it couldn't update are because it needs administrator access. If you right click, once you have it on the taskbar and you right click on it, then you can just run the window, the command as administrator. And then when you do an update help, you'll actually still get an error. It'll be a different error, and there'll be fewer commands that it can't update. I recently updated my help, so there's not much that has to be updated. But yeah, so it couldn't do a few, and I'm not sure why. It's telling me it's not because of access denied. The other error was access denied, and that's because had to run it as administrator. So, you know, certain things, anything that requires administrator access or requires elevation to do within Windows is, you know, if it requires elevation, then it require to run it as administrator in PowerShell.
So what is the update help doing exactly?
It's basically downloading all the help files for PowerShell. When a fresh install of Windows, the help files in PowerShell are very minimal. There's almost no information. They basically can tell you, you know, this basic syntax of the command, and that's about it. So if you want the full help that includes examples of running the command and everything else, you've got to run the update help command. So if you're going to be using PowerShell on any system, once that, you know, immediately after it's installed, you want to update help. And then periodically you run update help because Microsoft updates it. They add new examples, they fix things that were wrong, whatever else. So that's all it does. It just pulls from the internet. And you've got to have an internet connection. It pulls from the internet the latest and greatest help files available for PowerShell. Okay. Anything else on the getting started? All right. So for most of the time, we're not going to need the ISE. You can work in the ISE if you want. Some people like to work in it because it has command completion. What I mean is command hints. And so like when you start a command over in the right margin, it'll show you all of the options for that command. I don't use the ISE very much unless I'm writing an actual script that I will be using later on. But for just playing around in PowerShell, you generally speaking don't need the ISE unless you do what we did with Thawny, where we would, you know, if you were going to write a program, you do it up here. But if you're just going to play around with it, you would use the console, because in the bottom half of the ISE, it's just like using a window like this. So anyway, whatever floats your boat there. There are going to be a couple exercises later on where you want to probably do them in the ISE because you're going to be writing a script and then running the script. But when for purposes of today, mostly you just need to have a window. Okay, so get help. That's going to be sort of a command that I use frequently, that you'll most likely use frequently. So you can say get help and then any command that you want more information on, it'll give you that information. So writes customized output to a host. So it's basically your print command. It's just like, it's very similar to print in Python, except, you know, the syntax is different. There's no parentheses needed for one thing. And there's also other, you know, lots of different options, most of which I probably don't know what they do because I don't, you know, play around with the background colors or anything like that, or the foreground colors. But you can, you know, write your output in different colors if you want, or change the background color and stuff. And then if you go down in the help, you'll see at the bottom, okay, to see examples, expand your help command. So if I want to see examples of using write host, I just use the -examples option, and it gives me 5 examples here of using write host. If I want to see the full output of all the help, then I just say full, and I'll get everything, including all the examples. Okay. So yeah, you can, you know, kind of customize what the help shows you based on options that you include if you want. And quotes are for right host. Not they can be used, but not necessary. So do the same thing, right? With or without quotes. Whoops. Missed some of my command there. Okay, so either way works. There might be certain times where you want to use quotes, but for the most part, you don't need to. Okay, so I would say, you know, in this last command here, I already showed you an example of that, where if using the get help command, actually, you don't even have to use this right here is gonna, what that's gonna do, this get command will list for me all the commands that start with get-net. I have set-net in the example up here, but I use get-net down here. So every PowerShell command that starts with get-net is going to be listed. As you can see, there's quite a few of them. Okay, so so if you know that what you want is related to the network in some way, but you're not sure exactly what how to end the command, then you can just do a get command, get-net star, and it's going to list all those commands for you. As you can see, there's quite a few of them. And of course, you can then get help on any of the ones that you want to see more information on, like get-net UDP setting. And by the way, command completion also works with the parameters a lot of the times, if it's like a standard option or if it's another PowerShell command. You can start typing the command and then tab to get PowerShell to finish it for you. So get help, get-net. So it tells me what that particulars are of that particular command, which I really don't care about, but it's the first one I saw to use.
I'm unable to update my help in the escalated PowerShell. I'm using the VM for it though.
You're using the virtual machine?
Yeah.
And it's not letting you update the help?
Yeah, it's reading that it failed to update help for the module, etc., etc. See,
Okay,
it says
so
make sure
you get
or check your network connection and try the command again.
Oh. Okay. But did it like spin and go?
Yeah, it looked like it was starting to update, but it didn't do anything. Or it had an error afterward, actually.
Was it a different error than what I've got up on the screen? Or is it similar?
It's similar, yeah.
Then it's probably fine, because I get this too. So what you might just do is try to do, or let's do, do the right host, get help for right host, and see if you get something similar to what you see that I got. If yours is really very short and there's hardly anything there, that means it didn't update. But if yours looks a lot like mine, then it updated. It just I always get an error. There's certain things that the update help just fails on, and I'm not sure why. I've never tried to track down the error, but I've always gotten an error on update help, at least, you know, a minimal error like this. So I think it mostly updated, but probably just got the same error as I did. Are you getting something like this, Joshua?
Yes. Yeah.
Then you're probably good.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry.
Okay. So I'm not going to go ahead and do the exercise. Otherwise, you know, we might be here too long. Let's see, it says most likely you'll get an URL error. I'm not sure why that is. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if you'll get an error or not, but I'm just gonna continue on, and you guys can work on the exercises that are built into the PDF file. Let's talk about aliases. Aliases are, like I already mentioned, they're shortcuts. And if you want to see all the aliases that pre-exist within PowerShell, just use get alias. And you can see that there's a whole bunch of them that are pre-created. And you can create your own aliases if you want for commands that you might use frequently. So $% is the alias for each object. Question is alias for where object. So a lot of times when you're researching, looking at PowerShell stuff online, you'll see where in our go through of PowerShell, we're going to use the full commands for the most part. We're not going to use too many aliases, and that's just so that you understand the full command that's behind the alias. But once you get into PowerShell, if you do, you know, get into it deeply enough, then you'll learn what all the, you know, some of the aliases are, and you'll use them just to save some typing. You know, the first one that we can use is just help for get help. So help is identical to get help. They do produce the exact same thing. I say help and then PWD, which I know is also an alias. Also, if a command works and it doesn't use the verb dash or verb hyphen noun, then you know it's an alias. And if I'm asking for help on a command like help PWD, that PWD is obviously an alias because it doesn't use the verb dash noun syntax. And it'll even tell you name, get location. So it's telling you when I say help on PWD, it's saying what the actual name of the command is. And then it tells you gives you the help on the specific get location command. And the one difference about help versus get help is that help, the alias version of help, pipes the output to more so that you can paginate through the help instead of having to scroll up and down. You can just it by default paginates for you. So if I look and say get alias help, whoops. Let's try help. Yeah, help does get help. Look at get alias again. Help. So help must not be an alias actually. I thought it was. Help must be help must be an act like a function instead, and so that's why we don't see it show up in the get alias. I didn't realize that. I thought it was an alias, but no matter. It works similar to an alias. The difference is that it's running the get help command, but with some additional functionality like piping it to the more command. So using help is just like using get help, let's say write host, and piping it to more, and see how it paginates it. So instead of if you want your output paginated, then you might as well just go right to the original, go right to the help function, and it paginates for you by default. You having to do the piping.
Quick question. I'm
Yeah.
noticing a lot of similarities with Linux here. How close is this to pretty much Linux would be the question.
Not really.
Okay.
No. I
So
mean,
this-
they put a lot of Linux commands as aliases. So
that's it. Okay.
in PWD, yeah, you know, LS, but dir does the same thing as LS. So they're equally
Man, I was hoping I could just
throw the
learn.
bone to both command prompt and Linux there.
I was hoping I could learn one thing and just have it apply to everything, but that's never gonna happen.
No, not really. They just you know, it's really not at all like Bash shell programming either. Yeah, there's going to be some things that are similar to Bash shell programming in Linux, but also a lot of differences. So, and I'm not really that strong in the Linux command lines either. So there might be more differences than I could tell you. But there's going to be definitely a lot of differences too. Okay, so variables. Let's did I skip anything? No. Let's talk about variables. Variables are, they're similar idea as in Python and any other programming language. They're a storage container, a named storage for a value. The one big rule about variables in PowerShell is that when you reference a variable in PowerShell, they have to start with a $sign. So every variable in PowerShell starts with a $sign. So this works, new var equal, my copy paste from PDF must not be working very well. There, it's only partially working. Oh well, I thought I could save time and not have to retype everything, but the copy paste for whatever reason is not working so good. Let's see if I'm doing something wrong. That should copy. Yeah, it didn't, for whatever reason, it's not copying the whole thing. See, that doesn't work if I don't have a $sign in front of it. And notice how the color coding, a few things to note with color coding. Strings, a properly closed string will, in other words, there's a beginning and end quote, will be colored in this blue. A variable will have this kind of brightish green. Something that PowerShell hasn't determined what it is yet, at least on mine, puts it in yellow. Yeah, basically a command or something that Python thinks is going to be PowerShell thinks is going to be a command will be in that yellow color. And I think you can change the color coding in the PowerShell window under properties. I'm not sure if that's one of the things you can change. Yeah, you can change certain things. I wouldn't, unless you just really want to go to town with it. That way, when we talk about it, it's the same colors because I'm using the defaults here. Okay, what else about variables? They can hold just like in Python, integers, floating point, strings, arrays. Array is similar to a list. Hash tables, which are similar to Python dictionaries. And then just any object. Okay, everything in PowerShell, just like pretty much in Python too, is considered an object. And objects in PowerShell, as we can see, you're going to run into them a lot more than we did. You know, when we were dealing with things in Python, even though a list or a variable is technically an object in Python, we really could just say that they're a list or an integer or a string or something like that. But with PowerShell, you can take a variable and assign it to let's see. Well, let's just say get the output. You can assign the output of a command to a variable in PowerShell. So $n now contains what get-net64 configuration, at least in some way, it contains what it would have printed out. The printed version may or may not look different. Some of them do, some of them don't. Yeah, it looks pretty much the same. But sometimes you'll see what the bare printing out of something looks like is different than what it assigns to a variable. And that'll just be, you know, depending on what gets output by the command. So what is in N now is an object. If I want to know what type of object, there's something, you know, remember how we use the type command in the PowerShell or in the Python console to find out the type of variable? Well, you can do something similar in PowerShell using getType. And it's a method, and it'll tell you what type of object you've got. Not very explanatory. It's a system object, whatever that means. But you know, some information anyway. If I did $n equal 5, then it would say it's an integer 32. It says system.value type, but the name then says integer 32. And this is, the name of this is sim instance, which I don't really know exactly what that means. So, and same thing if I, you know, did this. It'd be interesting to see what it does here. So it calls it, it's a system object, but of name string. All right, so it's sort of what you kind of expected. So basically, just like in Python, if you don't know what type of value a particular command returns, you can always assign it to an object or assign it to a variable and then use the get type to get more information about the object. Okay. All right, so like I say here, objects can consist of a whole bunch of data, and objects are, you know, get commandlets typically return an object of some sort, depending on what the get command is. All right, let's look at some more information about variables. Let's in particular look at integers. This is going to be something that's quite different with PowerShell and how it treats strings versus variables than what Python does. So if we look at this set of commands here, so I'm taking a variable and assign it the value 4, and then another variable assigning it the value string 7. Now, what would Python do if I tried to do that?
You would get an error, wouldn't you?
It'd
Yeah,
break
you
out.
get an error because from Python standpoint, I'm trying to add a number and a string together, an integer and a string, and Python will blow up. PowerShell is quite happy to basically say, you know what? I think he really means that $B is a integer. So it does a little thinking for you, which I'm not really excited about that feature in PowerShell, but there it is. If the string happens to be an integer, you know, a number, a numeric value, then PowerShell is quite happy to allow you to treat it as such in an arithmetic statement. Okay, now the weird thing is, if I do the opposite, you would think, oh, well, it should, you know, A plus B, 4 plus 7 is 11, no matter whether it's 4 plus 7 or 7 plus 4. However, in PowerShell's world, it's not. So see what PowerShell did here. What PowerShell did is it took the type of the first variable and it said, okay, I'm going to treat this whole equation as a integer add. And since $B contains something that could be interpreted as an integer, I'm going to do so, and I'm going to do an integer add of A and B, and it produced 11. But when I did it the reverse, it looked at $B and said, well, $B is a string, so I'm going to treat this plus sign as a concatenation now instead of a arithmetic addition. I'm going to look at it as a string concatenation operator, and even though A contains an integer 4, I'm going to treat it as a string, and I'm going to concatenate those two together. So clearly not following the same rules that Python or just about any programming language you'll ever run across follows. Okay, just about any programming language would not allow you to do this in either direction. So a little peculiarity about PowerShell, definitely. I don't recommend doing this kind of thing as a normal practice, but PowerShell lets you do it. Let's see what happens if I do now. What do you think PowerShell is going to produce?
47.
So now here's the question: is that 47 or is that 4 and 7? So it's treating it all as a string. So
That looks like a mess.
yeah. I'm actually not sure what this is going to do, but I do mention this int function. I'm thinking that it's now going to the whole thing as an integer, and it did. Okay. So again, you know how you can cast strings to integer in Python. You can do the same thing with PowerShell, except like in this case, the integer, you're using square braces around the keyword integer instead of putting, instead of it being treated like a function. So it's done a little bit differently, but kind of the same result. So yeah, these are some, weirdnesses about the PowerShell world that, you just have to kind of get used to. So bottom line is when it sees stuff like this and this, the first variable type that it sees, that's what it ends up doing. So if I had done this 10 plus $A. Now $A and $B now are both strings, but 10 doesn't have quotes around it, so it's an integer. So now it treats the whole thing as a integer add operation. So it's the first thing that sort of tells PowerShell, oh, this is the way I'm going to treat the rest of it. Now, obviously, if I tried to do, now it's going to give me an error because hello isn't something that it can do an arithmetic add with. Now this, it said, okay, well, hello is first, so I'm going to treat the whole thing as a string. And so I'm going to make that 10 out there a string as well. I'm just going to concatenate all three strings together. All right, so you get the idea. Hopefully, it's a little confusing, but that's the way PowerShell works. And if you're ever uncertain as to what PowerShell is returning, you can always, put .get type at the end. Now, when you've got more than one term, like A plus B, you have to put it in parentheses so that PowerShell knows that you want the results of get type to be applied to the entire expression. Okay. Instead of just the B or just the A. Okay, doubles. A double is a kind of a different type that Python didn't have. Python really had integers and floats. But a double is really, it's stored like a floating point number. So by putting the .5 at the end of the number, putting a decimal point at the end of the number makes it a double, or you can cast it by using the double in front of it. Okay. So this up here, double $X, even though the 4 doesn't have a dot, to make it a floating point number, it's going to make it a floating point number by you casting it. So basically, you can look at it as doubles as being floating points. A string is similar to Python strings. They work very much the same way. So you can, although they don't have some of the cool extra features like, or at least not in the same way as, what's the word I'm looking for? Slices. But they do allow you, just like in Python, to index. And they start from 0, just like in Python. So $A sub 0 is the H in hello world. Okay. So 0 indexing applies in PowerShell just like it does in Python. Now here's something that PowerShell does for you that Python doesn't. Read host is the equivalent to the input, and you kind of use it in the same way. Let me see if I can copy this. So $in equal host. Okay, so if we see what it does there, it actually kind of pretties things up for you. Something that some of you will appreciate, who do their input statements without any kind of delimiter between the prompt and where the person types. In Python, you need to add that colon and space if you want it to look like this. And so some of you need to work on that in your Python, because when I would run your program, it would give me the prompt, but then where I'm typing, I'm right up against the last letter of the prompt, and that's not very good form. PowerShell goes and says, well, I know what you want, and it adds that colon and that space for you. So my cursor, as you can see, is hanging out, after the colon and a space. And so now $n contains my string that I entered. Okay, so automatically adds that. So if you add one, it's going to add another one for you. So don't do that. There might be a way. I don't know it because I don't look at I don't look at all the potential options of all the PowerShell commands. There may be a way to suppress the colon and the space in the read host. I guess one way we can find out is and see if there's any way to do that. Doesn't look like. Let's see if there's any. So as secure string is an option so that, like if you were asking someone to enter a password, you wouldn't see the letters, the characters they're typing. That's what as secure string does. Okay, so it doesn't look like there's any options to suppress the colon and space. At least not that I can see. Okay, but it doesn't really matter. Just know that it automatically does that. Okay, if the variable doesn't exist, it's created as a string. If the variable exists and it's already an integer or a double, only numeric input is allowed. So I already have $n, and then I'm going to, so yeah, that's weird. I expected, maybe I have to cast it to an integer. Or it's also possible that they change this at some point. Yeah. Okay, so if you have a variable that exists and it's of type integer for sure, in other words, you've cast it to type integer, then if you try to use it in a read host command, then and you don't put in, the user doesn't enter numeric data, then it's going to blow up on you. So that's a little bit of a peculiarity, because Python would just recreate the variable as a string. If I did this in Python, made a variable n equals 123, and then I did a n equals input, whatever, Python would just recreate the integer n, the variable n, and write over it with the string that you enter. So, but that's different about PowerShell. If it already exists and it's a numeric type, integer or double, then whatever the person enters at the screen, at the prompt, needs to be numeric. Okay, special variables, just like in Python, there was the true and false values or keywords. In PowerShell, they're actually like system variables. So they have that $sign in front of them. But you use them the same way. You can compare values to true or false. Let's see, $x equal $1. Work or not. Let's see. $x First off, let's see what that produces. It produces true. Yeah. So since these two equaled true, and then I compared it to the variable $true, then true equals true, and so that worked. There's also a special variable $null, so that's like sort of similar but not exactly like the none in Python. They're not exactly the same, but you can look at them as having similar properties, where they don't contain anything, any data type other than null or nothing. Okay, listings 9, page 11. We look at page 11 and 12. So you want to look at these little sample programs to just get some more practice. Some of these, are exactly what I have in the PowerShell, but there's also going to be some additional listings that go over some different aspects of variables. Okay, and also some new things like length. I don't think I covered that, did I? No. I think we do eventually. Okay, so true and false and dollar null. Yeah, anytime you want to do something like this, the write host, and what you want it to write is the results of a comparison, you need to enclose the comparison in parentheses. Otherwise, if you don't, let's see what happens if you don't. Okay, it basically just took the contents of $x, printed that, printed my -EQ as though it were a string, and then printed the contents of $B. So if that's what you want, then that's how you should do it. If you want it to write the results of that comparison, then you put it in parentheses. And we're about to see what that -EQ, you probably figured out by now, it means equal, similar to the double equal sign in Python, but we're going to get to that shortly. Okay, so moving on to arrays. Arrays, again, are just like, in a lot of ways, they're like lists. The syntax is a list of items enclosed in parentheses, although you don't need the parentheses. I can say $array equal 1, 2, 3, and it creates my array just fine. I don't think there's any difference, although I should verify. I'm not a PowerShell guru. I've written quite a number of scripts in it, but there's a lot of the little fine details that I just don't know. That's why I'll try things not always knowing the results. But yeah, these two produce the same thing with or without the parentheses. You can also do mix types with arrays, just like you can in Python. Okay, and you index them the same way. Okay, 0 indexed. Okay, and then here's where we in Python we would use the len function to find out how many elements were in the array. In PowerShell, it's not a function, it's a attribute. So you don't use parentheses. Actually, it's case insensitive, so I didn't use it. And so the length attribute tells you, how many elements are in the array. You can also use it, let's see, 0, 1, 2, 3. Let's see what this does. Okay, so what did that do? What did that $AR subscript 3.length do? What is that 11 giving me the length of? Because we already said that the array itself has 7 elements. It is 7 long. But why would looking at one of the elements of AR give me a length of 11?
Was it a string?
Yeah, it's a string. Hello there is the 3rd index value, and it's 11 characters long. So I basically just told it to give me the length of that string, which is the index 3 value of the array. And similarly, count and length. Oh, that's not what I wanted. When I say count, yeah, really isn't an alias. I'm not sure if that's when count is used on an object like an array, it produces the same value as length, because count is just telling you how many elements there are in the referenced variable, in this case, the array. Length is also telling you how many elements. But when I used length on the string that's contained in the array, length here is applying to that string hello world, and it has a length of 11. When I use count, there's only one element in $AR3. It's a single string. So in this case, they're producing different values, as they should. So it's a little bit, seems a little bit strange that it's doing that, but it makes sense if you think about $AR3 is referencing a string and its length is 11. $AR3, that string, the number of strings there are is just one string. So they're not really identical. They seem identical depending on the context that they're being used. Okay. Arrays of objects. Okay, so an array of objects, like I said before, certain commands return objects, like get net, whatever it was, and I assigned it to a variable, and it just returned one object. But certain commands return a whole bunch of objects. Okay, like get child item. What get child item does is it's like saying dir or ls. Matter of fact, let's look at it. So dir, the alias for the dir alias is the same as get child item. Same thing with ls if we look at it. Okay, so get child item is just the PowerShell way of doing a directory listing. So like I started to say, and I got rid of my command. A child item produces, a bunch of output. And so what's in $AR, whoops, clear the screen. What's in $AR is, exactly what get child item produced. But if I look at the type that AR is, it's an array. It's a system array. And so now I can say $AR dot length, and it's 7 elements long, or count. Okay, so get child item returned not just a single value, returned an array of values. And so I can now operate on, it's really a list of objects. Each line or each directory listing.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. Each directory line that get child item returned is its own object. And I can go through well, this goes to the next. Let's see if this. Oh, I don't. Actually, I don't want to do that. With the actual example. All right, so here's another array. I'm just a simple array of numbers. And if I want to iterate through those, there's actually a built-in method for arrays. So I don't have to do like a for loop like you would normally have to for with Python to iterate through each of those. So I can iterate through those $_ times. So what this just did is it took each number, and the for each basically tells PowerShell, I want you to go through each item of the array. And this syntax here, $_ is basically a placeholder variable for each item. So $_ the first time, the first iteration through, $_ is 1. And so it's multiplying 1 times 1. The second time through, $_ is 2. So it's multiplying 2 times 2. And then 3 times 3 and 4 times 4. Okay, so that's kind of a unique syntax in PowerShell that you'd have to do something a little bit different. You'd have to take your list and then do some sort of for loop to go through each of the elements and multiply them times each other. All right, so to look further into that syntax, like I said, $_ is a reference to the current object, which will be each object contained within the array. And then the braces are need to tell PowerShell that it basically that's just PowerShell syntax. You have to put references to objects that you're iterating over inside of the curly braces in order for PowerShell to understand what it is you're trying to do. There's a lot of that kind of weird syntax in PowerShell that you're going to have to get used to. Not too much that we're going to deal with, but if you start looking up PowerShell, Googling it and looking at various scripts of PowerShell, you're going to see this kind of syntax a lot. And it gets a little bit overwhelming until you understand exactly what it's doing. Okay, a hash or hash table, like I said, is similar to a dictionary. And even kind of the syntax to use it is similar. Whereas in Python, you use curly braces to create the dictionary. You didn't have to have the @ sign, but you do have to have the @ sign in PowerShell. And then the key comes first, just like in Python, but then instead of a colon, you use just the equal sign. And then you use a semicolon to separate each of the items within the dictionary. I don't know if that's gonna, I should do is bring up PowerPoint slide, copy and paste from it, which I'm going to do. Okay, here we go. I think that'll let me copy and paste into here. Yeah. Okay, so now to access any of the values for any of the keys, you just reference the dictionary name, which in this case is hash, and then the key value. And it tells you for any key that you reference, it gives you the corresponding value. This one's program descriptor. Okay, so again, similar to Python, or at least similar capability, just a slightly different syntax. With Python, you would say the name of the dictionary, and then left bracket, and then a string CNT190 right bracket in order to produce the corresponding value. All right, and then the listings on pages 14 and 15 of the PDF. Let's see if I can bring those up. 14. So in the PDF, you've got, they go into more extensive examples of using dictionaries. I cut it a little bit short because we're not going to really get into the use of hash tables, dictionaries in PowerShell for this course. You have to know the basics only for the quizzes, the PowerShell quizzes. So if you basically understand what this is doing, you're probably good for the quiz. All right. All right, so you can get rid of a variable. In other words, get rid of the contents of the variable by setting its by equating it to $null. So I've got that hash. If I say $hash equal $null, and gone. The contents are gone. And I think we're getting close to the end of this. I want you to do the exercise 5.9, where you create a variable, get its type, write it out to the screen. Not much to it. There's a few more steps, but all pretty basic. Okay, is that, let's see, I wanted you to get through what page this week? Let's see. Okay, through 6. So one more little section to do, and that's talking about the PowerShell environment. So the PowerShell environment is, just like command prompt. DOS has an environment. I'm gonna go into command prompt, and if you want to see all the variables and stuff that are part of your Windows command prompt environment, you can type the word set, and it shows you all kinds of stuff that, unless you've done this before, you had no idea was there. All of these things in the Windows command prompt environment, these are all variables that the system uses for various things behind the scenes for the most part. And also running applications can use these variables as well. So if an application wants to know what the current app data path is, it can reference the dollar, or it's actually percent app data percent in Windows command prompt. So these are all part of the command, the Windows, DOS, whatever you want to look at it, command prompt environment. A lot of them are paths, but some of them are, other things like the name of the server that logged me in. In other words, when I logged into my computer, a server out there responded to the login request and handled the login, and that's the name of the server that did that. So all kinds of different stuff that you can find out about your current environment in Windows by opening a command prompt and typing set. Tells you the processor architecture and stuff like that. Okay, current logged on user, username, all kinds of stuff. So PowerShell has its own environment. Let me get back to PowerShell. And instead of just doing set, there's get item. I don't know if there's an alias for this or not, but that's the syntax to do it. And it basically, you treat it like you're accessing a file system. So the backslash says, I want to get me all the items starting from the root of the environment. So that's going to give you all of the environment. And as you can see, most of the stuff is the same stuff that's in the command prompt environment. Some stuff is different, and it's shown a little bit in a different order, but PowerShell inherits much of its environment from command prompt. So most of this stuff is very similar, but there's some other things in here as well. If you wanted a specific environment variable, then if you know the name of the environment variable, you can specify it. And then if you want just the string, then you can put that whole get item in parentheses and say dot value. All right, or you could do this. You could assign the results. Do it this way. You can assign the results of get item to a variable, and then say $x dot value to get the same thing. If I just say $x, then it gives me, the whole shebang. So
Can you type in?
$x dot name. Is that what you're going to say?
Nope. I was going to ask if you can do the command where you had it in the brackets.
Huh?
So can you assign that to a value,
To a variable?
a variable.
And, you know, now it's probably just a string type. Yeah, it's just a string. Mhm. But before, if I didn't just, if I wanted $X to be that, the type for $X is a dictionary entry of system.value type. So, you know, what you have to do is look at and say, okay, you know, what are, well, actually, we're going to look at that later. We're going to look at what are all of the attributes that are available. Just like in Python, we had the dir command to find out what are the methods and attributes of any type of variable. There's a similar thing that you can do in PowerShell to get the methods and attributes of any type of object in PowerShell. I don't think that's today. I think that might be next week. Yeah, because this was the end of the first week's PowerPoint. So yeah, next week we're going to go into what comes after the PowerShell environment, and we're going to look at redirection and pipes. Again, reading and writing files, just like we did in Python. And then we're going to look at, might be a little bit later, we're going to look at some, you know, using if and else and loops. So basically, you know, we're doing many of the same things that we did in Python, but we're using a different language. So if you had a pretty good handle on, you know, the basics of Python variables and using loops and logic like if statements, then all we're really doing is translating that into another language. So I'm not going to spend a lot on the ins and outs of if logic or even for statements. We're just going to look at how it differs in syntax from Python, which pretty substantially some of the stuff does. And then we'll look at, you know, some differences in language like for each, which is similar to the for variable in list kind of thing that we had in Python. But it's just, you know, different keywords to use. And then let's see what else, just so you'll know. See if I can find what I'm looking for here. No, that was the end. Yeah, I think some of the other stuff that we'll be talking about in terms of getting further deeper into what you can do with objects once you've gotten them from PowerShell. We'll be looking at that a little bit later. Probably not next week, but the week after. All right. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to talk about here. Guess not. All right. All right, so that's it for PowerShell for tonight. Is there any questions that you have about PowerShell in general or specific? Nope. Okay. All right. Josh, I saw your mouth moving, but I didn't hear anything.
For all of the homework, do you want us to just use the commands with the hyphen in them or the dash, or is it okay to use the aliases?
It's okay to use aliases. trying to think. Let's look at what the assignment is. So where would you use an alias in this assignment?
Like for the directories and stuff.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah, I think I would prefer that you use the full commands. That way you get used to, typing PowerShell commands. So yeah, maybe that's actually a good question. I'm gonna edit the assignment. Somebody already turned it in, but I'm gonna edit the assignment and say that I would like to see the full PowerShell commands, not the aliases. Also, just to call your attention here, because this has been not, only one person has turned in this assignment, and he's not here, but I saw it in other years. People kind of misunderstand this first one here. It says list all the commands in PowerShell that get information related to your network adapter. And I give you a little hint that network adapter in PowerShell is the keyword net adapter. Okay, so off the top of your head, what would you use to list all the commands that get information related to your network adapter?
The get help net adapter.
Okay, and that's what. Let's find out what that produces, and I want to see show you the difference between what a lot of people have thought that it meant and what the command or what the assignment actually says. It says the commands that get information. Okay, if I just say get help net adapter, okay, it's showing me commands that disable the net adapter, enable the net adapter, set the net adapter, restart it. But the specific thing I'm looking for is
Would you use a star
list
get?
commands that.
Do you use star get?
Yeah. What I'm really wanting is get command, get net adapter star. Okay, because this will just give me the commands that get information about the network adapter. The get help net adapter gave me all kinds of commands that were related to net adapter, but they did something other than get information about your net adapter. And that's the key difference. This gives me all the commands related to net adapter, but I'm looking for all the commands that get information about the net adapter. So that's get command, get net adapter star. And if you see, it returns just the get commands. And the get commands in PowerShell are the only thing that's going to return information for you about that object. Okay. So I'm actually thinking I'm going to edit this and say, this is not a help or a get help command, okay, that you're looking for. Now all of you know what the answer is, but that's your extra advantage for showing up tonight, right? Because I had to mark somebody, off because they did exactly what you initially thought, Cody, which is it's get help net adapter. That gives you much more information than I'm looking for.
I turned it in already. I'm gonna resubmit it.
Are you okay? All right, that's fine. Resubmit it. I'll only look at the most recent anyway. Okay. Any other questions on that first assignment? First PowerShell assignment. All right. I think we covered everything you need to know to do it, so.
I was just saying earlier, sorry that I was late and sorry that I cut out mid-stream. I had some Wi-Fi issues tonight. So.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right, so that's pretty much it. Just to let you know, I'm not going to go over assignment 6D. Normally I, might do that, but so few people have turned it in. Most of you actually probably have. I don't remember exactly who, but definitely some of the people that are here have turned it in. But so I did want to give the people that haven't or that did but really need to work on it some more a chance to do that. And but as of Monday, this link here, assignment 6D video review, that will be available to you. Right now, you can't access it because it's not available till Monday. And so instead of us taking time through Zoom, I did this last year because it was right about now that we we had to stop classes because of COVID. So I did a video review of the assignment instead. So I go over this 6D in detail. So if you haven't turned anything in by Monday, too late. You're gonna get a 0 for the assignment because this goes over the assignment in very much detail. So any changes, if you have turned it in and you didn't get full credit and you want to get additional credit, you got to turn in those changes by Monday or before Monday, because this goes live Monday at 8 a.m.
Can I just ask one quick question on that though?
Oh, you can ask a question about it, sure, yeah.
Yeah, because I guess I was confused on this. You want the message to be added together, name and message, then sent together, right? Because I was looking at it and I saw udbsoc.send to message : that, and I thought that was all in one line, and I could not get that to work at all. I was very confused on that.
Yeah, I saw yours, and what you ended up doing was almost identical, except that you had a space. All that you needed to do was say message equal name plus quote colon quote plus message.
Okay. My thought process was that within the UDP soc.send to parentheses there,
Yeah,
there was a way to connect them together.
No.
Okay, see, that's what I was trying to do, and I was like, oh, this is not
Oh, yeah,
working.
I saw that, and you commented that out, and then you
Yeah.
concatenated it. You just didn't quite concatenate it right.
Oh, okay, cool. All right.
So
I was trying to find something that didn't exist, I guess.
Yeah, you were. So it was a nice thought if you could do that. But I put that in your comment in the grade book. So.
And I guess I need to look up the difference between break and continue again because I might have forgotten that.
Yeah, continue will just skip the rest of the code in the code block, the for or the while loop, and go back to the top and start the loop over. Break gets you out of the loop altogether. And that's not what you want to do in this assignment. In this assignment, you want to, if the IP address or the port is invalid, you want to just skip that line, which means you do a continue, and then you go back to the top of the loop, which gets you the next line of from the file or from the list.
Okay, so it breaks you out and goes back to the beginning of the for loop, or beginning to the if else statements.
It goes to the
I guess I'm confused.
It skips the rest of the code in the for loop or while. I guess it's a for loop.
Okay.
Yeah, it skips the rest of the code in the for loop and goes to the top of the for loop again. And so it's basically says we're going to skip this line and go and get the next line. You've got a for something in something. So it's going to get the next element.
Well,
of
I
that.
have my check of IP address and check of port number, both in the same for loop. So let's say if I put a continue at the end of that check IP address and it continues, would it completely skip over the port num and then get the next IP address? Well, I guess that
Well,
would be an issue. Then.
yeah, but that's what you want. If either of those are invalid, you just want to skip the whole message
Oh,
and
okay.
you just go get the next message. That
Okay,
includes-
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
I was like,
IP
oh,
address.
it needs to check the port number also, but it really doesn't need to.
No, you need to check the IP address. If there's anything invalid about the IP address, continue.
Got it.
If there's anything, and then if it's all good, then if there's anything invalid about the port number, continue.
Okay,
And then if they're both good, then you actually send the message
got it.
and increment your counter. Okay.
Okay,
All right.
sounds good.